Some stories in the Bible leave us inspired, others leave us trembling. But then there are those that leave us confused. What if I told you there was a man who was marked before he was even born, a man whose destiny seemed cursed from the very beginning? His name is Esau, but the truth behind his story may not be what you think. There's a prophecy hidden in this ancient tale that has baffled scholars, divided theologians, and pierced the hearts of many. It's a story wrapped in silence, shadows, and scandal, one that will challenge your view of fairness, purpose, and God's divine order. If you've ever wondered why life feels unfair or questioned whether destiny can be rewritten, you're not alone. If this strikes something deep within you, type 777 inches, the comments as a declaration that you're ready to seek truth beyond the surface. Your engagement here isn't just support, it's a sacred part of this unfolding journey. And to everyone who has stood with us, especially through super thanks, I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. So take a breath, steady your heart. We're about to step into one of the Bible's most haunting and misunderstood stories, where every choice, every word, and every silence holds weight. This is the beginning of Esau's journey, and nothing about it is ordinary. Esau, hated by God from birth, the shocking truth will leave you stunned. Long ago, in the ancient hills and valleys of Canaan, a story began that would ripple through the centuries, shaping the destinies of kings and nations. In a modest dwelling, far from the palaces of power, lived Isaac, the promised son of Abraham, the man to whom God had sworn an everlasting covenant, and his beloved wife, Rebekah. Their love was steadfast, but one desire weighed heavily upon them, the hope for a child, an heir who would carry the covenant forward. Year after year passed in silence, and the absence of a child became a shadow over their home. Still, they did not let despair take root. Isaac, remembering the faith of his father, turned his heart toward the heavens, praying not once but continually pleading that the God who had opened barren wombs before would once again reveal his power. Then, in God's appointed time, the silence was broken. Rebekah's womb quickened with life, a miracle that stirred joy and awe in the household. Yet, almost as soon as hope had bloomed, unease began to grow. Her joy was tempered by a strange, relentless stirring within her, as though two forces wrestled in secret. This was no gentle movement of life, but a struggle, an unseen conflict pressing against her from within. Imagine the fear and wonder of feeling a battle raging inside your own body. What could it mean? Was this a sign of blessing or of coming trouble? Seeking no counsel from man, Rebekah went directly to the source. She inquired of the Lord, perhaps remembering the stories of Sarah's laughter and Hagar's tears, knowing that only God could explain such a mystery. And the Lord's answer came, not as a soft comfort, but as a declaration that would echo for generations. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from your body. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Genesis 25-23. Those words were heavy with prophecy, enigmatic, unsettling, and unchangeable. They did not simply foretell the birth of 2 sons, they spoke of 2 destinies, 2 paths that would diverge sharply, and 2 peoples whose conflict would be written into history. If you were Rebekah in that moment, would you feel honored to carry such a divine mystery? or troubled to know that the struggle had already begun before their first breath. For what she carried was more than life. It was the seed of a rivalry that would outlast her own years and reach far beyond the walls of her home. At last, the long months of waiting came to an end. The air in the household was thick with anticipation as family and servants gathered, whispering prayers and expecting the moment when Rebekah's cries would give way to the sound of new life. But when the birth began, a surprise awaited them all. Not one child emerged, but two twins, each distinct from the very first breath. The first to break into the world was a striking sight, his skin a deep, ruddy hue, his small frame wrapped in a thick coat of hair, as though nature had clothed him for the wilderness before he had ever seen it. Those who beheld him could not help but exchange glances. He was given the name Esau, meaning hairy, a name that would follow him like a shadow throughout his life. Yet before the midwife could draw her breath, the second child appeared, and with him came a scene that would be remembered with awe. His tiny hand clung tightly to the heel of his older brother, as though unwilling to let him pass first into the world. This act earned him the name Jacob, heel grabber or supplanter, a name that, though innocent in that moment, carried the weight of destiny. What could it mean? That from the very moment of birth, Jacob reached out to grasp what was before him. Was it a simple reflex, or the first sign of a life marked by pursuit and cunning? As the years unfolded, the contrast between them became even sharper, like the blazing noon sun and the cool shadow of evening. Esau, the elder, grew into a man of raw strength and unyielding energy. The outdoors called to him like a drumbeat in the distance, and he answered it with every fiber of his being. His days were spent striding through the rugged hills, bow in hand, hunting wild game with the skill of one born to the chase. The smell of the earth clung to him, his clothes carried the wind and dust of untamed places. His wild mane of hair and his bold spirit gave him the air of a man who could not be bound by walls. Jacob, in contrast, found his comfort beneath the woven coverings of the family's tents. His was a quiet strength, born of patience and perception. While his brother chased deer through the fields, Jacob was learning the subtle art of negotiation, the rhythms of trade, and the customs of his people. He studied the stories of his forefathers, absorbing not just their words, but their wisdom. His mind was a storehouse of plans and possibilities, always turning, always seeking the advantage. Even in the heart of their family, the division was clear. Isaac, the aging patriarch, saw in Esau the vigor and bravery that stirred something deep within him. Perhaps it reminded him of his own youth, or the bold faith of Abraham crossing into unknown lands. He delighted in the savory game Esau brought home, meat seasoned with the wilderness, meals that awakened old memories. Esau's very presence, the tang of the hunt still on his garments, seemed to warm his father's spirit. Rebekah, however, felt the pull of her heart toward Jacob. Perhaps she remembered the words the Lord had spoken to her when they were yet in her womb. Or perhaps she simply cherished his quiet companionship, the way he listened, the way he stayed. In the stillness of the tents, they shared conversations and moments that knit their hearts together. Two brothers, two lives, two loves, and already the line between them was being drawn. Many years passed, and the story of these two brothers, Jacob and Esau, did not fade into the dust of history. Instead, it became a point of divine reflection, spoken again through the lips of a prophet centuries later. In the days of Malachi, the voice of the Lord pierced the complacency of his people with words that carried both love and judgment. I have loved you, says the Lord. But you ask, how have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares the Lord. Yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated. And I have turned his hill country into a wasteland and left his inheritance to the desert jackals. Malachi 1-2-3. Nivanbati. At first, hearing such words can startle the heart. How could the God of mercy speak in such a way? Yet the meaning lay deeper than a human sense of personal like or dislike. This was not a statement of mere emotion, but a declaration of sovereign choice, a thread in the vast and intricate tapestry of God's redemptive plan. The Lord was not simply weighing two personalities. He was appointing roles in a story that spanned from Abraham's covenant to the salvation of nations. In the culture of that time, the position of the firstborn was far more than a matter of birth order. It was a sacred trust. The firstborn son was heir not only to the lion's share of his father's estate, but also to the blessing of the patriarch, a spiritual inheritance that carried with it the promises of God. For Isaac's household, that meant nothing less than the covenant first given to Abraham, that through his seed, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Genesis 22:18. Imagine the weight of such a promise, an invisible crown placed upon the head of the firstborn, binding him to a destiny that would echo into eternity. Yet, from the moment the twins struggled within Rebekah's womb, God had whispered a truth that defied the customs of men: the older will serve the younger. That prophecy, so strange at the time, began to take shape in ways no one could have plotted in their own mind. The path before Esau, though crowned with the privileges of the firstborn, began to twist into unforeseen turns. What happens when the course of one's life collides with the will of the Almighty? What do you do when the role you thought was yours slips silently into the hands of another? So it is with us as well. Life unfolds with both its joys and its trials, and we often find ourselves in moments we did not foresee. It is there, in the tension between expectation and reality, that faith is tested. And in those moments, may your spirit remain anchored, your mind unshaken, and your days lit by the unyielding light of the Lord. For his blessings are not bound by human order, and his guidance never falters. The quiet yet undeniable divide in their parents' affections was not lost on the brothers. Though no words were spoken, each felt the weight of it in different ways. Esau, assured of his father's admiration and bolstered by the privileges of being the firstborn, moved through life with an air of confidence that bordered on carelessness. His place in the household felt unshakable, as if nothing could challenge his standing. Jacob, however, carried within him a different fire. Living in the shadow of his older brother, he measured every glance, every word, and every opportunity. Beneath his calm exterior lay a restless determination, an unspoken vow that one day the order of things would shift. On a day when the relentless sun burned hot enough to bleach the horizon, the land itself seemed to groan under its weight. The air quivered above the cracked, thirsty soil, and the distant hills shimmered like molten bronze. It was in this dry and weary land that a new chapter in the story of these brothers was quietly taking shape, one that would ripple far beyond their lifetimes, shaping the destinies of entire nations yet unborn. Esau, the hunter who thrived on the chase, had left home in the cool dimness before sunrise. Bow in hand, quiver heavy with arrows, his movements through the wilderness were swift and sure. But the day had conspired against him. The sun climbed higher, its heat pressing down like an unyielding hand, and the land fell silent. No hoofbeats, no rustle in the thickets, only the heavy breath of the wind across the barren hills. Game that might have been plentiful on another day had vanished, retreating into caves and shadows beyond reach. Back at the encampment, Jacob moved with quiet purpose, tending to the daily rhythms of the household. The scent of simmering food hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dust and sun-baked earth. Yet even as his hands worked, his gaze would wander toward the horizon, scanning the wavering heat for the first sign of Esau's return. The air felt charged like the stillness before a storm, though no cloud had yet formed. As the hours crept toward evening, the sun sank lower in the west, painting the barren hills in molten gold and blood-red streaks. The air was still hot, but shadows began to stretch across the land like long, reaching fingers. Then, at the edge of the wavering horizon, a lone figure emerged, moving slowly, each step heavy with fatigue. It was Esau, but not the Esau known for his vigor and unshakable strength. His shoulders sagged, his gait faltered, and his once proud stride had been reduced to the weary shuffle of a man spent to his last breath. The wilderness had defeated him that day. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, thirst burned in his throat, and the relentless sun had stripped away his energy until only weakness remained. Carried on, the evening breeze came, a fragrance rich, warm, irresistible. The aroma of cooking lentils drifted across the camp, winding its way to the hunter's senses like a rope drawing him forward. His tired eyes locked onto the source, a large clay pot set over the fire, its contents bubbling gently, sending up curls of steam. Inside, Jacob's lentil stew simmered, its deep red hue catching the glow of the fading light. Esau's voice was hoarse, his words uneven as he reached the doorway of the tent. "Brother," he managed between breaths, "please, let me have some of that red stew. I am so hungry I might faint." The plea was raw, stripped of pride, the sound of a man brought low. Jacob looked up from his place beside the fire. His gaze lingered on Esau, taking in the sweat-streaked face, the trembling hands, the shallow breaths. He did not rush to answer. The fire popped softly. The stew continued its slow boil, and between them hung a silence thick enough to taste. Jacob's mind turned quickly, measuring the moment. This was no ordinary request, and this was no ordinary day. When he finally spoke, his words were deliberate. Each syllable weighed like gold on a scale. "Of course, brother, but first, sell me your birthright." Endardity. He was fiction. The sentence fell like a stone into the quiet. The birthright. This was not merely an earthly inheritance. It was the mantle of the firstborn, a sacred trust carrying authority, leadership, and the covenant blessings of Abraham himself, land, lineage, and the promise that through his seed, all nations would be blessed. To part with it was to surrender a divine appointment, to lay down something eternal for something fleeting. Esau's answer came without pause, his desperation drowning out the voice of reason. "Look, I'm about to die from hunger. What good is the birthright to me?" In that instant, the sacred became negotiable. Jacob leaned forward slightly, seizing the moment before it could slip away. "Swear to me now." "No, I'm after." And so, under the fading sun, Esau swore the oath, trading the unseen riches of eternity for the comfort of a single meal. The bargain was sealed. Jacob placed before him bread and the steaming lentil stew, and Esau ate and drank until the edge of his hunger was gone. Yet what he had lost could not be cooked in a pot or weighed on a scale. When the last crumbs were brushed away and his thirst quenched, Esau rose to his feet. The urgency of the moment had passed for him, replaced by the dull satisfaction of a full stomach. He walked away into the gathering twilight, seemingly unaware or unwilling to acknowledge that he had just surrendered something no man could restore. What happened between those two brothers in the quiet of that camp was more than a family exchange. It was the turning of a great wheel in history, the moment when prophecy began to take flesh. The oath spoken that evening would echo in the halls of time, shaping destinies not yet born, and altering the course of nations forever. Esau's decision that day spoke volumes about the man he was. His life was ruled by the urgencies of the present moment, his thoughts tethered to what could satisfy him here and now. Hunger had stripped away the caution of reason, and exhaustion had clouded the clarity of judgment. In a single exchange, he had allowed a temporary need to outweigh a permanent inheritance. The birthright was more than property. It was a living thread woven into the covenant promises of God, carrying with it not only material wealth, but the spiritual mantle of leadership. By trading it for a single meal, Esau had revealed not only his lack of foresight, but also a disregard for the sacred heritage entrusted to the firstborn of Abraham's line. Jacob, in contrast, had shown himself to be a man who could see beyond the hunger of an evening. His request, poised and deliberate, exposed his calculating nature. He was willing to wait for opportunities and to seize them with precision when they came. In this moment, he discerned the weight of what was at stake. The birthright was not merely a title. It was the key to the blessing through which God had promised to shape the future. Yet his method was far from pure. It was opportunistic, taking advantage of his brother's weakness to secure something of eternal significance. His morality might be questioned, but his determination could not be denied. In the days that followed, the household carried on, yet something invisible had shifted. Esau, his strength restored, moved through his routines as if nothing had happened. He returned to the hunt, bow in hand, vanishing into the wilds as though the oath by the stew pot had been nothing more than idle words. Jacob, however, carried the memory like a hidden treasure. He spoke of it to no one, guarding the secret as a man guards an uncut gem, waiting for the appointed time to bring it into the light. But secrets do not remain buried forever. Word of the exchange began to ripple quietly through the family. Servants whispered, and small fragments of the story reached the ears of Rebekah. For her, the news brought a mix of surprise and a quiet stirring of satisfaction. She had always believed Jacob was the son destined to carry forward the covenant. And though she might not have chosen this method, she saw in it the shaping of God's plan. Isaac, however, remained untouched by the knowledge. His eyesight, already dim, shielded him from noticing the subtle currents that now flowed between his sons. He saw no shift in their conversations, no tension in their greetings. Yet beneath the surface, the bond between the brothers had been altered forever, and the house of Isaac now carried within it a hidden fracture, one that would, in time, break open for all to see. The scene between Jacob and Esau reaches beyond the confines of their tent. It stretches into the realm of our own hearts and lives. It forces us to wrestle with a piercing truth. What is it that we truly treasure? Is it comfort, security, recognition, or something eternal? And when the pressure of hunger, whether literal or figurative, presses against us, how quickly might we be willing to part with what is sacred for the fleeting relief of the moment? Esau's choice, made in the haze of exhaustion, is a mirror to the human tendency to trade the permanent for the temporary, the priceless for the convenient. This single exchange also reminds us that the smallest decision made in a passing moment can carry the weight of generations. Esau's hasty surrender of his birthright was not an isolated act. It became a turning point in the unfolding history of nations. The covenant promise that had rested upon the shoulders of the firstborn was shifted, and with it, the trajectory of an entire people changed. How many times in our own lives have we acted without pausing to measure the true cost, only to find that the consequences extended further than we ever imagined? And here, another layer of mystery rises, the tension between divine sovereignty and human choice. Long before the twins had drawn their first breath, God had spoken to Rebekah, "The older will serve the younger." The day at the stew pot appeared to be the very moment that prophecy began to manifest. Yet the question lingers, was this the inevitable unfolding of God's decree? Or was it the result of two brothers making choices out of ambition, desire, and weakness? In this, the story does not offer easy answers. It leaves us in that sacred tension where fate and free will meet, where God's eternal purposes move forward, often through the imperfect hands of human beings. As the seasons turned and the household of Isaac moved through its daily rhythms, the quiet consequences of that fateful exchange began to take shape. Jacob, now carrying the unseen mantle of the birthright, walked with a new sense of certainty. His tasks within the family grew more substantial, overseeing provisions, tending to matters of trade, listening intently when elders spoke of law, custom, and covenant. In his own mind, he was no longer the younger brother playing a lesser role. He was a leader in the making, already rehearsing for the day when authority would rest fully on his shoulders. Esau, in contrast, seemed unchanged, still vanishing into the hills at dawn, still returning with the scent of wild earth clinging to him, still living as though the oath he had sworn over a pot of stew meant nothing. There was no outward sign of regret, no attempt to reclaim what had been lost. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted. The birthright, though invisible, was like a hidden ember. It had the power to spark fire at any moment. And now, deep in the unseen spaces of their relationship, the first faint heat of conflict began to rise. What had once been the natural tension between brothers was now an undercurrent that would not fade. Words were exchanged with sharper edges. Glances lingered longer, as though testing the other's resolve. Both of them, in their own way, were moving toward a point where the past could no longer remain buried. It was only a matter of time before this tension would break into the open, unleashing consequences neither could control. The exchange of the birthright remains more than an ancient family dispute. It is a living reminder of how even the smallest choices can redirect the flow of a life, and sometimes the flow of history itself. Decisions are like stones cast into water. Their ripples touch shores we cannot yet see. For that reason, we must seek the wisdom of God, the one who sees the end from the beginning, whose counsel is perfect, whose plans cannot be undone. In his hands, even what is lost can be redeemed, and what is broken can be made whole again. If you hold to the belief that God's hand guides each choice you make, let your faith be known. Write Amen as a declaration not only to share your conviction, but to strengthen the hearts of others who walk the same path. And so, as the sun dipped low over Isaac's encampment that evening, painting the canvas of the sky with deep crimson and gold, no one could yet measure the true weight of what had taken place. But the ground had shifted, the pattern of the future had been altered. Greater trials, sharper conflicts, and decisive moments lay ahead, moments that would not only define the lives of Jacob and Esau, but would shape the destinies of entire nations. The story of these two brothers was still unfolding, and the chapters yet to come would carry both the force of prophecy and the fire of human choice. Many years had slipped by since the day Esau, weary and hungry, had exchanged his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew. The memory of that moment had faded from everyday conversation, yet it remained like a hidden current beneath calm waters, quiet, unseen, but steadily shaping the course of the family's future. On the surface, life in the tents of Isaac continued as it always had. Herds were tended, trade was made, meals were shared, but the thread of destiny was still moving forward, weaving toward an appointed hour that would forever alter the legacy of Abraham's line. Isaac, now the venerable patriarch, bore the weight of many years. His hair had turned white. His once steady hands trembled slightly, and the keen eyes that had once surveyed the land with precision had grown dim. The world before him was now a blur of shadow and light, yet his mind still carried the wisdom of decades, and his voice still held the authority of the one chosen to guard the covenant blessing. That blessing, the patriarchal benediction, was no simple farewell. It was a sacred transfer of spiritual authority, a declaration carrying the promises of God himself, land, descendants, and the divine favor meant to flow through generations. One still afternoon, as the desert wind whispered against the tent walls, Isaac called for Esau, his firstborn, the son he favored above all others. Esau entered, tall and strong as ever, his presence filling the space. Isaac's voice, though softened by age, still bore the weight of command. "My son, I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, go out into the field and hunt for me game. Prepare for me the kind of savory meal I love, and bring it to me, so that my soul may bless you before I die." Is it ever for Esau? This was more than a task, it was an honor. The blessing of his father would affirm his place as leader of the family, sealing his inheritance both in the eyes of men and before the God of his fathers. Without hesitation, he gathered his weapons, the familiar weight of the bow in his hand, stirring memories of countless hunts. His heart was eager to please the father, whose approval meant everything to him. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed by the open expanse of the wilderness. Inside the tent, the silence deepened. From the shadows beyond the curtain, another figure emerged, watchful, deliberate, and aware that a moment of destiny was about to unfold. Who was this figure? And what part would they play in what was about to happen? It was Rebekah, Isaac's wife, the matriarch of the household, and mother to both Esau and Jacob. She had been nearby when Isaac summoned his firstborn, and every word of the conversation had reached her ears. From the moment she heard the intent in Isaac's voice, her heart quickened. She knew the blessing was about to be passed, and with it, the destiny of the covenant would be sealed. To her, there was no time to waste. Moving swiftly through the tented corridors, she found Jacob, the son she loved most dearly, drawing him close. Her voice dropped to a hurried whisper. "Listen carefully," she said, urgency tightening each syllable. "I heard your father speak to Esau. He told him to go to the fields, hunt for game, and prepare the kind of meal he loves so that he may bless him before the Lord, before he dies. Now, my son, pay close attention to what I tell you. Go to the flock. Bring me 2 choice young goats, and I will prepare them for your father just the way he likes." In too well pursed, Jacob's mind moved quickly, weighing the words and the danger. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in defiance, but in calculation. "But mother," he replied, "Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. If my father touches me, he will know I am deceiving him. Instead of blessing me, he will curse me." In 2 well throats, Rebekah's gaze did not waver. Her voice, steady and resolute, carried both the firmness of command and the weight of maternal devotion. "My son, let the curse fall on me. You must do as I say. Go now and bring me the goats. Number 2 Menfa." The plan moved forward without hesitation. From the flock came the young goats, and Rebekah's hands worked swiftly, seasoning and roasting the meat until the air filled with the savory aroma Isaac loved. She then went to Esau's chest and drew out his finest garments, the ones that carried the scent of the open fields, of wild hunts and sun-drenched days. Dressing Jacob in them, she transformed him piece by piece. To complete the disguise, she draped the soft yet bristly goatskins across his hands and around the smooth curve of his neck, imitating the rough texture of Esau's skin. When all was ready, Rebekah placed the steaming dish into Jacob's hands. His heart pounded with the weight of what was to come. Yet he stepped toward the entrance of his father's tent. The fabric rustled as he crossed the threshold, bringing with him the meal prepared in secrecy and the scent of a man who was not himself. The next words he would speak could change the course of everything. "Father, it is I." Jacob called from just inside the tent, forcing his voice lower, trying to mimic the cadence of Esau's speech. The air inside was dim, heavy with the mingled scent of roasting meat and the faint aroma of desert sand carried in on his clothes. Isaac stirred slightly on his mat, his clouded eyes turning toward the sound. The swiftness of the return made his brow furrow. "Who are you?" "My son?" he asked, his tone slow, probing. "I am Esau, your firstborn," Jacob replied, keeping his breath steady, though his pulse thundered in his ears. "I have done as you asked. Please sit up and eat the game I hunted, so that you may bless me." Where Rigotli Gedid, there was a pause long enough for Jacob to feel his courage waver. Isaac's instincts were not dulled by blindness alone. Suspicion had crept into his voice. "Come closer," the old patriarch said, "that I may touch you, my son, to know whether you are truly Esau." Where Rigotli Gedid, Jacob stepped forward, each movement deliberate, his mind repeating the instructions his mother had given. Isaac's weathered hands rose, fingers brushing across the goatskins wrapped around Jacob's arms, then sliding to the rough covering on his neck. The touch was slow, lingering. The voice, Isaac murmured under his breath, is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's. Rend, donus velar, still. Uncertainty gnawed at him. "Are you really Esau?" "My son?" he asked again. more sharply this time. Jacob's throat tightened, but he forced the words out. Steady and firm. I am. The lie seemed to hang in the air like a shadow between them. Isaac exhaled, perhaps weary of questioning. Bring me the food, he said. Jacob placed the steaming plate into his father's hands, pouring the wine to complete the offering. The patriarch ate slowly, savoring each bite of the meat prepared just as he loved it. When the cup was drained, he gestured for Jacob to come closer. As Jacob leaned in, Isaac's arms encircled him, and he drew in the scent of the garments, Esau's garments rich with the aroma of open fields, of wild grass under the sun, of a life lived in the hunt. The last fragments of doubt dissolved. Then, in the solemn authority of a man chosen to carry God's covenant, Isaac began to speak the words recorded in Genesis 27 to 27:29. The smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Is one blessed? The blessing rolled through the tent like the sound of a river in flood full of life, power, and destiny. Each word settled over Jacob's shoulders like a mantle of both honor and weight. He could feel the tremor in his own hands, the pounding of his own heart. The moment was real. The blessing meant for Esau had been spoken over him, and there was no taking it back. Jacob had barely stepped out of his father's tent, the echo of the blessing still lingering in the air. When the sound of approaching footsteps broke the stillness, Esau returned from the hunt, his face flushed with the pride of success. A string of fresh game slung over his shoulder. He moved quickly, eager to fulfill his father's request and claim what he believed was rightfully his. He dressed the meat with practiced skill, seasoning it in the way Isaac loved, and the aroma soon filled the air. Carrying the dish with confidence, he stepped into the dim interior of the tent. "Father, it's me," Esau called, his voice bright with anticipation. "Rise and eat the game I have hunted, so that you may bless me." "Welly," Isaac turned toward the voice, his clouded eyes narrowing. Confusion creased his brow. "Who are you?" he asked slowly. "I am Esau, your firstborn son," came the reply. The words fell like a thunderclap in Isaac's ears. The realization struck him with such force that his whole body trembled violently. His breath caught, and a weight like stone settled over his chest. "Then who was it?" he demanded, his voice quivering. "Who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." Not when zest. Esau's face went pale, the joy in his eyes collapsing into shock. The truth pierced him. He had been outwitted, robbed of what he had awaited all his life. The cry that broke from his lips was raw and guttural, filled with a pain that reached to the core. He fell before his father. "Bless me, too, my father," he pleaded, his voice shaking under the weight of grief. But Isaac's reply was heavy with sorrow. "Your brother came deceitfully," he said, "and has taken your blessing. Ready, wed godly." Esau's grief fled into fury. "No wonder he is called Jacob," he cried out, his voice ringing with both rage and anguish. "He has deceived me twice, first taking my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing." Then, softening into desperation, He looked into his father's face. "Have you not reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac's answer came like a blade to the heart. "I have made him lord over you, and have given him all his brothers as servants. I have provided him with grain and new wine. What, then, can I do for you, my son?" Still, Esau refused to relent. Tears streamed down his face as he clung to the last thread of hope. "Is there nothing left for me, Father? Please bless me." His sobs rose in the tent, heavy and unrestrained. Moved by the anguish of his son, Isaac spoke again, but the words, though a blessing, carried the taste of bitterness, a shadow of what could have been. "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will break his yoke from your neck." They can't. It fine downed. The ten-rocker meant. The patriarch's voice faded into silence, but his words seemed to cling to the walls of the tent. In that moment, the fates of the two sons were sealed. The wound between them was now carved deep, and from it would flow the story of two nations forever bound by blood, yet forever divided by blessing. Jacob's deception had succeeded. The coveted patriarchal blessing was now his, carrying with it the promises of God, the authority of leadership, and the honor of the covenant line. But the cost of his victory was already beginning to show. What he had gained in a single afternoon would exact a price far greater than he could have imagined, one that would follow him for years to come. In Esau's heart, the wound was raw, the bitterness deep. The blessing stolen from him was not merely a family honor, it was his life's inheritance. The crown he had expected to wear. Anger hardened into hatred, and hatred took form in a dark resolve. Esau thought, "Father will soon die, and then I will kill Jacob. It will belong to men." Word of this murderous intent reached Rebekah, carried on whispers in the household. She knew the heart of her elder son well enough to believe the threat was no idle boast. Acting swiftly, she summoned Jacob to her side. Her voice was firm, yet laced with urgency. "Your brother is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now, my son, obey my voice. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay there for a while, until your brother's fury has turned away, until his anger has subsided and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send word for you to return. Then come into the stops." And so Jacob departed, leaving behind the tents of his father, the familiarity of his homeland, and the web of conflict he had spun. The blessing he had sought so desperately was now his, but the path before him would be marked by exile, uncertainty, and trials that would test both his cunning and his faith. His footsteps carried him toward distant lands and into the hands of a future he could neither fully see nor control. Esau remained, but his heart was far from at peace. Bitterness clung to him like a shadow, a constant reminder of the betrayal. The bond of brotherhood had been severed beyond repair. The rift between them, now a chasm too wide to cross. Each would go on to father nations, yet their descendants would carry the echoes of this division for generations. The story of this deception and its bitter aftermath is not just a tale of ancient rivalry. It is a mirror. How many times have human hearts, driven by desire, grasped at what they wanted without weighing the true cost? How often have we pursued victory in the moment, blind to the long shadow it would cast over the years to come? In Jacob's gain and Esau's loss lies a warning. that the pursuit of a goal at the expense of truth, trust, and dignity leaves a mark that time alone cannot erase. The path of Esau and Jacob, once intertwined from the womb, had now split in two directions, as surely as a river divides at a fork. Jacob, carrying both the birthright and the patriarchal blessing, had fled into the unknown, his steps leading toward distant lands. Esau remained in Canaan, walking the soil of his forefathers, but carrying a weight that could not be seen: loss, resentment, and the gnawing emptiness left by the rift with his twin. The choices each man would make from this point would not only shape their own destinies, but ripple outward to touch the fate of nations yet unborn. For Esau, the hunter, the man of the open fields, life now stood at an important crossroads. The blessing was gone, the relationship with his brother shattered, and the approval of his parents strained. The void in his life demanded to be filled, and in the years that followed, he would try to fill it in ways that carried consequences far beyond himself. When he reached the age of 40, a milestone laden with meaning in the culture of his time, Esau made a choice that brought deep grief to his parents and met with their clear disapproval. He took for himself 2 wives, Judith, the daughter of Beeri, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon, both women of the Hittite people. The Hittites were known for their distinct customs, their own gods, and a way of life completely at odds with the covenant heritage of Abraham. To Isaac and Rebekah, this decision was not only culturally and spiritually troubling, but a step away from the divine promises entrusted to their family. The scriptures record it simply but with weight. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah, Genesis 26-35. That short statement veils a deep and personal pain, one that went beyond disliking their son's choice of wives. To them, Esau's marriages risked diluting the chosen lineage and entangling it with beliefs and practices foreign to the God who had called Abraham out of Ur. In the quiet of the tents, this decision must have stirred unspoken tensions. Rebekah, who had always believed Jacob was the rightful heir to the covenant, likely saw in Esau's marriage yet another sign confirming her conviction. Isaac's feelings were more conflicted. His love for his firstborn son never wavered. Yet his heart was heavy with the knowledge that Esau's path now stood in sharp contrast to everything he had learned and cherished in his walk with God. Esau's Hittite wives brought with them the culture, rituals, and beliefs of their people. Slowly, the atmosphere in Isaac's household began to change. The patriarch's tent, once the sacred center where the God of Abraham was worshipped, where the covenant traditions were carefully kept, was now touched by unfamiliar practices. Words were spoken in a tongue not used in worship. Feasts were celebrated for gods foreign to the covenant, and the rhythm of family life began to beat to a different, more divided cadence. This cultural mingling could not help but stir tension. For Isaac and Rebekah, it was as though a subtle intrusion had entered the heart of their home. The old ways were being tested by customs that did not honor the promises God had given to Abraham. Yet Esau seemed blind to the depth of the disruption, or perhaps he saw it clearly and, in his bitterness over losing the blessing, chose to walk a path deliberately apart from the one his family cherished. Whatever his reasons, the course of his life had been set, and with it, the path of his descendants. Years passed. Esau built his own household apart from his parents, a domain marked by his skill as a hunter and his enduring strength in the open fields. In the eyes of many, he remained a man to be respected, powerful, capable, and self-reliant. Children were born into his household. Growing up under the influence of two worlds, their father's heritage as the grandson of Abraham and their mother's traditions rooted in the Hittite culture around their fires, the stories of the patriarchs might mingle with tales of the Hittite gods. The two legacies entwined in a way that reflected both the richness and the fracture of Esau's choices. Then, one day, news arrived that stirred the embers of the past. Word spread through the land. Jacob, after many years in exile, was returning to Canaan, but he was not coming back empty-handed. Traveling with him were his wives, children, servants, and fast herds. His caravan was large, his possessions abundant, and his return unmistakably triumphant. For Esau, the message must have cut deep. The brother who had deceived him, taken his birthright and blessing, and forced him into years of estrangement, was now returning in visible prosperity. Old wounds, long buried under the dust of time, began to ache again. The thought of facing Jacob once more would not be a simple matter of family reunion. It would be the reopening of a story that had never truly found its ending. It was in this season of shifting loyalties and deep undercurrents that Esau made another significant decision, one that, unlike his earlier marriages, was both deliberate in strategy and profound in meaning. Word had long reached him that his Hittite wives had been a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah, their customs pulling against the fabric of the family's covenant heritage, whether through personal reflection, wounded pride, or the stirring of conscience. Esau resolved to take another wife. This time, the choice would be intentional, calculated, and deeply tied to the legacy of his family. He set out to visit Ishmael, Isaac's half-brother, the son of Abraham through Hagar, from Ishmael's household. He took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael and sister of Nebaioth, as his wife. This was no random alliance. To marry a descendant of Abraham was to tie himself once more to the bloodline of the covenant, as though to say, I still belong to this family. In a way, it was a silent echo of the truth later expressed in Galatians 3:29. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Then, this marriage revealed more than a political move. It was a window into the complexity of Esau's character. Though his earlier choices had drawn him away from the traditions of his father's house, some ember of connection still smoldered within him. Perhaps he hoped this union would heal the wound of disappointment in his parents' eyes, or at least serve as a gesture that he had not wholly abandoned the heritage of his forefathers. Yet even this step could not undo the trajectory already set in motion. The blessing of leadership and covenant promise now rested on Jacob, and Esau's life was unfolding along a different course. His earlier decisions marrying into the Hittites, surrendering his birthright, losing the patriarchal blessing had already charted the path for him and his descendants. It was a path that, though still tied to Abraham's bloodline, would lead them steadily away from the promised land, toward a future marked not by the covenant's fulfillment, but by a separate destiny written in the shadow of what might have been. Over the years, Esau's life and choices carried him farther from the center of the covenant promise. In time, he and his household moved to the rugged, mountainous region southeast of Canaan. The relocation was more than a practical decision, it was a statement. By settling in the southeast, Esau was not only changing his address, he was drawing a physical and symbolic boundary between himself and the promised lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It marked the beginning of a separate people, a nation that would bear his name and his legacy. The mountains of the southeast proved fertile ground for his ambitions. There, Esau thrived. His flocks and herds multiplied. His household expanded, and his descendants became strong and numerous. In the generations that followed, the people of Esau would emerge as a significant force in the region, their influence felt in the history of Israel for centuries to come. Genesis 36 records their genealogy in meticulous detail, a testament to the scope and strength of Esau's line. His descendants rose to prominence as chiefs, kings, and leaders of renown. The land came to be known as Edom, and it was here that Esau's people built their wealth and power. Edom became a formidable nation, prosperous, well-defended, and influential. Yet its very existence stood as a reminder of the great divide between two brothers and the two nations they founded. Esau's journey from the tents of Isaac and Rebekah to the highlands of Seir was a path marked by pivotal choices and their far-reaching consequences. He had entered the world first, with the privilege of the birthright, an inheritance of both material abundance and spiritual authority. In the ancient world, such a privilege was second only to life itself. But in a moment of hunger and short-sightedness, he traded it away to Jacob for a bowl of lentil stew. That single act would define his legacy in ways he could not have foreseen, revealing a man more concerned with immediate need than enduring value. This choice cost Esau dearly. The birthright's loss set in motion a chain of events that would alter the course of his life. Later, when Isaac prepared to bestow the patriarchal blessing on his firstborn, Jacob, guided by Rebekah, deceived his father and received the blessing meant for Esau. The moment Esau learned of this betrayal, a flood of anguish and rage consumed him. The hurt ran deeper than the loss itself. It was the pain of being undermined by his own twin. His grief quickly hardened into a vow of vengeance, a promise that fractured the bond between them beyond repair. In the end, Esau left the household of Isaac behind and made the land of Seir his own. From there, he built the kingdom of Edom, a land and a people whose story would forever stand alongside, and often against, the story of Israel. Though the patriarchal blessing had passed to Jacob, Esau was far from broken. In the rugged highlands of Seir, he laid the foundations of a strong and enduring kingdom, Edom. Its fortresses rose from the red rock, its herds and flocks multiplied, and its people grew into a nation with a secure future. Esau's leadership, combined with the strength of his descendants, ensured that Edom would not be a forgotten name, but a power recognized in the region. Yet the shadow of the past never fully lifted. The bond between Esau and Jacob had been strained by betrayal and loss. And even after their personal reconciliation, the relationship between their descendants remained uneasy. Edom and Israel, two nations born of the same family, would stand across from one another in a tension that lasted for centuries. Their shared history became a living testimony to the complexity of family ties, the shifting nature of power, and the intricate dynamics between nations. Seasons of fragile peace were interwoven with moments of rivalry, each shaped by the choices of their forefathers. In this way, the story of Edom and Israel became more than political history. It was the reflection of two men's choices. Esau's path showed that, even without the spiritual inheritance of the blessing, one could rise, build, and prosper. Yet it also proved that personal choices can leave legacies far beyond a single lifetime, shaping nations and destinies in ways both intended and unforeseen. When the brothers finally met again after years apart, their words and gestures spoke of peace, but their lives took different directions. They did not return to dwell side by side. Jacob remained in the land promised to him. Esau returned to his own territory. This separation of homes was more than practical, it was symbolic. It marked the divergence of their destinies, a physical boundary mirroring the separate courses their descendants would walk. Their story remains a vivid reminder of the enduring impact of personal decisions, especially within the bonds of family. The choices we make, whether in moments of hunger, ambition, bitterness, or reconciliation, do not end with us. They ripple outward into the lives of those who come after. Esau's life is proof that even when the expected path is lost, it is still possible to build a legacy of strength, identity, and resilience. And while we may not always walk the road first intended for us, the journey can still hold purpose and meaning far beyond what we imagined. Esau's legacy stretches far beyond the years of his own lifetime. From the rugged mountains of Seir, his descendants forged a powerful and enduring nation, the land of Edom, rich in copper and other mineral resources. Strategically positioned along vital trade routes, Edom became a center of wealth and influence. For centuries, its fortresses guarded its borders, its merchants prospered, and its leaders held sway over a region coveted by many. Yet the story of Edom cannot be told without its constant, complicated dance with Israel, the nation born of Jacob. The bond between the two peoples was rooted in shared blood, yet strained by an ancient rivalry. There were seasons when Israel's power overshadowed Edom, fulfilling part of Isaac's prophetic blessing that Esau would serve his brother. But history also records moments when Edom shook off that yoke, rising in open defiance and reclaiming independence through force of arms. Their relationship was a cycle of dominance, rebellion, and uneasy coexistence, each turn echoing the tensions between the twin brothers from whom they came. One of the most intriguing elements of Esau's legacy lies in how he is remembered within Jewish and Christian traditions. Jacob is celebrated as the patriarch of Israel, the father of the 12 tribes, and the direct heir of the covenant. Esau, by contrast, is often cast as the man who despised his birthright, his image reduced to a cautionary figure of impulsiveness and misplaced priorities. Yet, a closer reading of the biblical account reveals a man of greater complexity. Esau could indeed be impulsive. Driven by appetite and immediate desire, he could be reckless, making choices without measuring their lasting cost. But he was also capable of surprising grace, generosity, and restraint. His reconciliation with Jacob after decades of separation stands as one of the most striking acts of forgiveness in the Old Testament, an embrace that defied the weight of betrayal, personal loss, and long-held anger. In that moment, Esau's nobility shone, offering a glimpse of a man whose life, though marked by missteps, was not without honor. Esau's legacy invites reflection on themes that reach far beyond his lifetime: the worth we assign to our heritage, both material and spiritual, the complexity and fragility of family bonds, the possibility of healing and reconciliation after even the deepest wounds, and the sobering truth that our choices ripple outward, shaping not only our own lives but also the lives of generations to come. His story is also a reminder that history is often told from the vantage point of the victors. The biblical record, shaped primarily through the lineage of Jacob, focuses on the unfolding of the covenant promise through Israel. Yet, within its pages, there are glimpses of Esau's strength, prosperity, and influence evidence that his path, though different from Jacob's, was no less significant in the grand mosaic of God's plan. Edom's wealth, its strategic position along the trade routes, and its resilience as a nation testify that Esau carved out a destiny of his own. Ultimately, Esau's life stands as a testament to the complexity of the human experience. He was neither wholly villain nor flawless hero, but a man whose story reminds us that our lives are not defined by a single moment of triumph or failure. They are shaped by the sum of our decisions, our relationships, and the ways we respond to both blessing and loss. His reconciliation with Jacob remains one of the most moving episodes in Scripture, a moment when decades of anger and estrangement melted into an embrace. It is a scene that defies bitterness and proves that even the most fractured relationships can be restored when pride yields to humility and hurt is met with grace. For this reason, Esau's story continues to echo through the centuries, pressing upon us questions that are as relevant today as they were in the days of the patriarchs. What choices will we make when faced with immediate desire versus long-term promise? Which relationships will we choose to protect, and which will we allow to wither? What kind of legacy will we leave for those who follow after us? As the firstborn son, Esau once stood on the threshold of inheritance, responsibility, and blessing. Yet, with a single impulsive choice, he set in motion events that would reshape the course of his destiny. The sale of his birthright, the heartbreak of being deceived, and the eventual act of reconciliation with Jacob. These are not merely the episodes of two ancient brothers, but timeless lessons on forgiveness, the weight of our decisions, and the far-reaching consequences that follow them. In Esau's story, we see both the fragility and the resilience of the human heart, and we are reminded that even a path altered by loss can still be walked with dignity, strength, and meaning. The life of Esau stands before us, not just as an ancient record, but as a mirror for our own hearts. His story is a vivid reminder that a single choice can change the course of a lifetime. Yet it also shows that even when we lose what we thought we could never replace, we can still rise, build, and leave a legacy worth remembering. To me, Esau's journey speaks of both caution and hope. Caution, because in moments of weakness, we are tempted to trade what is priceless for what is immediate, forgetting the weight of the future. Hope, because even after mistakes, life can still be meaningful. Relationships can still be restored, and a new path can still be carved out of broken ground. In our world today, we may not be selling birthrights for bowls of stew, but how often do we trade time with our family for fleeting distractions? How often do we set aside our faith, our integrity, or our values for something that satisfies only for a moment? Esau's story challenges us to value what truly lasts: our faith, our relationships, and the calling God has placed upon our lives. I believe that each of us, like Esau, will face crossroads where the choice we make will echo for years. The question is, will we choose the temporary or the eternal, the convenient or the right, the easy path or the one that honors God's purpose for us? If this story has stirred something in you, if it has made you think differently about your own decisions, your family, and your faith, then I invite you to be part of this journey with us. Like this video so it can reach more hearts. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell, and join us as we explore more stories that inspire, challenge, and transform. And if Esau's story has touched you, leave a comment below. Just type Amen as a declaration that you choose to walk in God's wisdom and blessing. Thank you for watching, for supporting, and for being part of a community that seeks truth and meaning in God's Word. Your presence here matters, and together we will continue to learn, grow, and leave a legacy that honors the one who gave us life.